Well, welcome.
Very official.
Very official. This is not how we normally do things, I'm going to say. So I've got Kirsti Grant with me, who is an old friend, and she's here to really tell us a little bit of a history about what she's doing in her current startup, which is absolutely unbelievable and a great story. And the reason that we wanted to have an FJ chat with her was to really get a bit of a sense of that story and also some of the lessons she's learned, and to understand how the global stage sort of starts to play out. So, Kirsti, firstly, welcome. Can you give us a little bit of history? You better pitch your product. What's the product?
Let me talk about the problem first, because the problem is, it's where it all came about. So, being VP of Talent at Vend, high growth tech company, global, all of the things that are pretty magical about the startup scene.
So when you say high growth, how many were you trying to get on?
So in the 2 years that I was there, we went from 37 all in Auckland to 250 in Auckland, Wellington, Melbourne, San Francisco, Toronto, London, and Berlin. Yeah. So pretty high growth. So we were pretty busy, and every single day I was working off this spreadsheet, and it was the hiring plan, and it didn't even have our existing headcount on there. It was purely just the plan. But then all of these other spreadsheets would pop up throughout the business. So the product and engineering team, they would have a spreadsheet with all of their team in there, so they could kind of play around with it. And sales would have one, and marketing would have one. And my job was to kind of make sure that everyone was on the same page, but also make sure that finance were getting the latest information about what the movements were within the organisation, what we were spending, what was coming up.
So literally everyone on the same spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Let alone the same page.
But we couldn't. And we couldn't share the same spreadsheet because there was all salary information, and we couldn't have everybody know what everyone was earning. It was awful. And I remember saying, this was a wee while ago now, to our CFO Angus, and just being like, there has to be a better way. Like, is there anything out there? And so I kind of started having a bit of a look around, because I'm a bit of a magpie when it comes to technology, which you know. And I like the new shiny things, and I just couldn't find anything. And so on finishing up in August of last year, just really wanted to see if it was going to be a thing. And didn't have the luxury of a huge amount of cash and, just general cash to kind of start a company.
Just real quality,
just
living. It's called living allowance.
And so we needed to make sure that we were going to be building, if we were going to be building something, that we were building the right thing, that people wanted it, and that people were willing to pay for it.
So you figured out for you there was a need, and you couldn't find anything to solve it. Is the next step then figuring out mine is unique, or was it shared?
Mm-hmm. So we talked to a ton of different companies all over the world, all different industries, right from 10 employees just up the road to 19,000. We got a really good indication of the processes they were following. So how were they managing their strategic workforce planning yearly, but then how were they kind of adjusting things as time went on? So were they having quarterly meetings or monthly meetings, or was everything run on spreadsheets? Who was involved? Just all of the things relating to their processes.
Did you but sort of focus on US? Is that because they seem to be so much more headcount focused about moving that headcount and knowing whether it is up, down on a quarterly basis?
It wasn't even we must focus on the US. It was just we can't just focus on New Zealand.
Yeah.
Because it's not big enough, and we thought we had a thing. We're like, let's just take it to everyone. So when we talk about our core markets, we talk about Australia and New Zealand, because they're here, it's close, it's home, and we want to look after our market. North America, so US and Canada, and then the UK. But the reality is that's worldwide, and we talk to people all over the world.
So the first efforts of impressive that you got some entree into some of these companies. So you obviously used your connections pretty well.
Sales as well. Sales background.
So then you get in and you go, what if? And did some light bulbs go off that people said?
So once people realised where I was kind of going, because we didn't have a solution at that point. I was completely going in and just asking all the questions. I was like, we don't have anything right now, but we want to build something because we think this is a thing. And as we were talking to people, they're like, we see what you're doing here. Yeah. And we got a few different people, and one in particular, a US startup who's pretty well known. They knew instantly what we were doing, and they just kind of bonded with the idea. And so we've been working with them right since kind of day one, and the plan is to bring them on board probably late this quarter or early next quarter. But it'll be a good logo to put on the website for sure.
Got a pretty good idea who that is. So if that's the case, what was the potential risk for you then in sharing so openly to understand whether there was a market that in fact the IP's gone because you're just spreading it out there?
It's really easy to come up with ideas. It's really hard to execute.
Okay.
So we basically, and I believed we could, I was like, we have got everything that we need to execute really well. I was like, I've got the people stuff and I've got the connections with people that if I don't know the answer, I can certainly go and find it. Lance, who is my co-founder and partner, he is the product guy. Like, he knows how to build a product. And I think if it hadn't have been for him, I would have just rushed off and gone, build this thing.
Yeah.
Whereas he was just like, no.
And then I'll show you the shiny thing.
Exactly. And then, you know, the 2 engineers that we have on board, and we have someone in marketing now as well. I was like, we can do this. Like, we can actually execute. And so I wasn't ever worried about it, about talking to people about the idea.
If you get to that point where you say, okay, they say there's a thing, you go, I knew there was a thing, you come back, so we can build it. So then you get into the iteration process about how you're going through. Tell me about that.
So it was a month-long process. We went from really basic drawings that Lance did, so really basic wireframes, to nice, beautiful designs that a designer did. And we reiterated probably 3 or 4 times in the space of that month, just refining things, because we pitched to probably about 120 companies. So all of the same companies.
There's a lot of information to manage.
Spreadsheets.
Yeah.
That's how I managed it. There's another idea. Yeah. So we took on all of the feedback. We were really lucky that because we'd done the research up front, we actually hit the mark. And so there was just some small tweaks that we kind of had to do to make it a little bit better. But I think we...
So your minimum viable product was in your head almost. It was, with a bit of shaping, was pretty much there.
And this is like right back from when I first sent to Angus about the idea. I had this kind of image in my head, and it's what we have today, which is pretty cool.
That's pretty exciting, because it also means...
It's way fancier, but it's...
But it's also validation for you that, you know, okay, well, this is heading on the right sort of track.
Yeah.
And so then out of development, you're then getting to the point of saying, okay, who's going to use it, who's going to talk about it, who's going to make it the next thing.
Yeah. So we've only just come out of development, so we've had customers using it since the beginning of June. So it's still really early days, but everything kind of happened between now and then. So there's kind of a little step that happened where we actually built kind of a working prototype where you could click on it and people would actually think that they were using the product kind of thing, but they weren't at all. And it was built off like folders, and it was smoke and mirrors 100%. And we never said that it wasn't, you know, that it was actually the product or anything like that. But what that enabled us to do is to put it actually in front of people for a couple of months and just like constantly be using it and playing with it and watching how things were kind of happening. And then it meant that when we brought our engineers on full time, it was just full steam ahead. So it happened really, really, really fast. We threw a US trip in there as well. So we spent 3 weeks in the US, and it's all very well to sit down in New Zealand and talk to companies on the other side of the world. That's one thing, but actually going over there and walking in their doors and spending some quality time and looking at the way that they do things and the processes that they're following, and just really getting a good understanding of how they roll. And we learned a lot. We changed a lot when we got back from that trip.
I was going to say, is that actually daunting in a way? Because you think, you know, okay, you know, A, it could be bigger than we thought, but B, you know, there's a lot of things we could do here.
Yeah.
And you end up with that sort of,
and that's where we had lots, like just refining it down. So what we ended up deciding, and this is probably going to be quite valuable for the video's purpose, like actually saying what we built. So we basically have built a product that replaces those spreadsheets. So it centralizes all of your information from your headcount that exists within the business already to your planned future hires. It enables you to collaborate on that information. So there's commenting and there's an activity feed on each job, so you can see how changes are occurring.
We'll be running populate.io along the bottom.
Yeah, nice. But it's really cool because you can see how things are changing over time. So, you know, there's a lot kind of going on. So there was centralized information, there was the collaborate, and then there was the give some basic insights. So let people actually see what was going on in their business without having to run reports. So actually being able to see how much you're spending in a department without having to go and pull something. from somewhere fancy.
And and people who look through and click on the link that's about to appear underneath you will see that the strap line there is headcount hero, and I think Kirsten tells me it's going to change, but I think it's actually one of the cool things is that headcount is up and down. Mm-hmm. And that actually, particularly American companies, actually dropping people off is not easy, and well, they tend to make it easier than others, but you've got to do it with pace, mm-hmm. and that's not something we're really used to, really, in New Zealand. And so to even get into that mentality of having to have something that can deal with that speed.
Has to be super dynamic and real time, and because you can't just wait for like someone to update something in some other place and then you get that information a week later. Like finance, they're constantly reforecasting and they want to know like the latest. People are the biggest expense in the business, and it's probably the part that they have the least control over at times. And so it needed to be just fast and to be able to deal with those changes in a business.
So what you're also collecting is a lot of data. Mm-hmm. So in behind all this lovely thing, which is very user-friendly and has lots of things that help you, is you're collecting a lot of data.
Yeah.
And so is there a game around turning that into information?
Yeah, when we set out, there were a couple of things that we wanted to be able to say we could do with that data. We wanted our customers to be able to ask any question of it and get an answer. So that's why we're collecting so much. We also wanted them to be able to compare themselves to others. And to
how many people am I hiring in this range, in this dollar value, in this location?
Or, hey, I need to hire a management accountant in Auckland and I'm this kind of company. This is my, I'm in manufacturing and I'm, in a particular stage of business. And actually being able to get information back of what, low, medium and high salaries might be based on actual data versus salary surveys and hearsay.
Given that you're in this part of the hockey stick, and that's
that part down there, like we're way
the
down.
Very lowest part of the
we're
hockey
just
stick.
Getting started. Yeah.
So, and that's the breathless part, right? So, every hour that you're not committed to actually getting something moving forward, you're going back with all that stuff. Yeah. So how are you coping with this phase? Because this is not about developing the product now. This is actually getting it.
This is everything. So like marketing sites all happening. So we've got a new marketing site. All of our marketing is kicking off. We've got content. We're committing to 16 pieces of content a month. Like everything is go, go, go. The product is constantly evolving, and that's one of the beauties of having a software as a service product built the way that we've built it, is that there are changes daily and enhancements daily, which people love. But like there is so much going on. Not only that it's, Lance and I are together, so we live together. Our office is in our home, so we have employees
it's a 24/7
in our home.
job.
It's like constant, but I love it. It's so much fun. There are definitely moments where I'm like, what on earth am I doing? And why am I doing this? But that's normal. And I think like coming to grips with the fact that you know nothing is probably one of the biggest things. Like being okay with not having all the answers is
well, I think one of the things that impresses me is the fact that you've always asked. And the other part is the fact that this is gutsy stuff. This is a sort of West Coast South Island gutsy stuff. This is sort of you're digging deep to go and do this, which is fantastic. And so how do you cope with the setbacks? What sort of setbacks have you had, and how have you rocked through them?
I am learning to cope with the setbacks.
Okay, we'll take it.
We've been really lucky. We've been fortunate. Like, everything has been very deliberate about what we've done. So we've minimised the risks and we've actually minimised the setbacks. So we've had a lot of good stuff. We've had great media. We've had some awesome investment. We have great meetings and demos. I'm yet to have someone turn around and go, I don't get what you're doing. Okay. And that's probably the biggest thing. That keeps me going. Yeah. But I'm quite impatient. Shock horror, sure. I know. And I always think that things will happen way faster than they will. And I think my biggest thing now is learning that things always take longer and that I've just got to be calm. And I have a team that I have to lead, so I have to...
Yeah, that's different.
Like, calm my farm a little bit. And
so what about for you then? What have you learned in this journey? And given that we're at door one of 68 doors...
There's so much. Like, I even probably couldn't give you a top 5. Every single day I'm learning 100 different things. You think that you know a lot, and then you start a company, particularly like a software company. Like, I'm selling software. I've never sold software before. And I didn't realise that until last week. And I'm sitting there...
How long have you been selling software? Well, about,
Yeah. And that's interesting. I'm learning a lot about working with investors and pitching in that regard. You know, you're talking a lot of money and you're talking about telling a story that is getting people excited enough to want to give you a ton of money. So you learn a lot in that regard.
And is that something about also understanding that it's the I'm thinking of the words, the follow-on mentality. You know, if you can knock off that one, then these guys will come too. Sort of getting the journey going.
Yeah. We've been very, very strategic about that part.
Pick your investors.
Getting some names. Yeah.
And that makes a difference. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And smart money as well. Like there's a ton of cash out there. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of money to invest, but they might not actually be able to add a lot of value to us. And we want to make sure that the people we're bringing on board really know our space, not necessarily HR tech, but really know software as a service, really know how to scale companies globally, and have done it before. So we're kind of forming a bit of a team around us that can fill the gaps that we have, because there's lots.
I think that was one of the things that impressed me so much is that you started off with this idea, but it was a global idea, and almost sort of retro-engineered it to say, okay, now we need to build it here because that's the only way we can get out over there.
And we have such an advantage. Like, there's a disadvantage of being in the bottom of the world trying to do this, but it is such an advantage because you have to think big. You have to think about different ways of doing things. You don't have that luxury of a huge market on your doorstep. And lots of talent as well. You know, you just have to do things really, really smart.
We'll put the links up to Twitter so they can follow your progress. Everyone should be interested in what happens with this company because I think it's going to be one of New Zealand's real success stories.
It'll be good.
Hey, lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Nice to see you.